Shalom, when the star of souls, but giving no praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Ka'akodash. Double honors to the apostles of great Most and honors to brothers doing the work of the Most High in truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the real name of whom the world ignorantly calls God, Jehovah, or Yahweh. His real name is Yahweh. The son's true name is Yahushua. And when we pray Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba meaning in, Ha meaning the, and Sham meaning names, Yahweh, and the name of Yahushua. Just wanted to touch on this one real quick, because we use the chat, we use it for what it is. We understand that this is part of Esau's miracles. We can get that right. So Revelation 16:14. This is for the spirit of devils working miracles, right? And this is certainly one of the miracles. The things that you're able to do. With the chat, the fact that you can with the Sora version of it. Generate videos and make things that just aren't real. I've used it for for what I do in my line of work. I've used it for a bit of interior design because I don't know what I'm doing in that field, but I know what I like. But it's just machine code. It's just ones and zeros on a computer, yet it's able to do so much. But it's very much is a miracle, right? It's part of his Esau's miracles, and you best believe that he's going to use these tools as a means of enslavement. Okay, so we finish off, right? Revelation 16:14. For the spirit of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of the Most High Almighty, right? And then just finishing off this point, it says Ezekiel 28. Start from 2. Says, Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, thus saith the Lord power, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God, right? And this AI is very much going to help Esau to go towards that, right? Because one of the things that the Most High is attributed as being is being all-knowing, right? And this AI is certainly gonna allow E to get to that stage, right? It says, I sit in the seat of the Most High in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man, not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. Okay, so Esau's just a man, right? It says, verse 3 says, behold, thou art wiser than Daniel, there is no secret that they can hide from thee. Right, and once again, when you're looking into this AI and how it works, it's a wonder, right? It is a wonder, that the Most High has basically given this man. Okay, but this is the problem, right? Because it is also something that is used by E to control the narrative, right? He and the point, and I don't really know where this is gonna go, but long story short, the backstory is was chatting to which was someone I know, right? And basically her pops died a couple of months ago, right? And then she was just posting about like her mom basically missing her husband, right? One of the things that came to mind again is just this idea, this notion, that men generally die soon after their women dies or whatever, especially you consider in this world, right? How basically the thing that's pushed is this idea of one man, one woman, right? But then also you look at the case of our forefather Jacob, right, who loved Rachel dearly, right? And when she died, you can see that it had an effect on him, right? But the point just being, especially in this world where it is just this idea of one man, one woman, right? You do see men basically, dying soon after their wives. So basically, I wanted to, get the chat to get me some physiological, to kind of go into the biology of that, if there are some, other things. But the main thing that it started pushing, right, was this, basically this notion, if you read the underlying tone, right, which we're going to go into it, of men are useless and they need women, right? Now, there are certain things that women are more inclined to do, which is true. But let's just read through it, right? So that, so I asked the robot, right, why do men generally die soon after their wives? So that's a really insightful and somewhat sad question. It says, and it's something researchers have studied for decades. the pattern you're referring to is called the widowhood effect, right? It says the observed tendency for one spouse, often the husband, to die relatively soon after the death of the other, right? It says emotional and psychological impact, right? Grief and stress. The emotional toll of losing a lifelong partner can lead to chronic stress, depression, and even physiological changes that can increase health risks. Like there is, if I remember correctly, there is actually a you can actually die of a broken heart, right? Let me see. Let me ask this robot, right? Bring this into this screen. Right, so it says from the Google robot, right? So it says, yes, you can die from a broken heart, though it is extremely rare. The medical condition is known as Takotsubo cardiomyopathy or broken heart syndrome, right? It is a temporary stress-induced form of heart failure that can sometimes lead to serious complications or death in vulnerable individuals, right? So, so basically you see it there. I just wanted to get that point. Right. So this is men. So going back to the chat robot, right? So men often rely heavily on their wives for emotional support, right? Whereas women tend to have broader social networks and may cope better, right? Where wives often act as health managers, reminding husbands to take medication, eat well, attend medical appointments, and maintain social ties, right? After a wife's death, right? And then it said, in bold, men may neglect diet, medication, or hygiene, accelerating health decline. Right, women are generally more proactive about seeking medical help. Men may delay or avoid it. Right, now there are certain aspects of this that is true, right? But basic what I was thinking of was just, once again, this is this idea, in parts, that is just pushing this idea that men basically aren't, the incompetent male thing that Esau likes to push, right? So let's grab this here real quick, right? This is Jeremiah 31:22. How long will thou go about, O thou backsliding daughter? For Yahweh hath created a new thing in the earth. A woman shall come past a man, right? And one of the things that you see he push very much so is this idea, right? You really think back and you watch a lot of the stuff that, if you observe a lot of the stuff that we watched growing up, right, that trope is pushed heavily. Okay, that trope is pushed heavily, such that subconsciously there is this idea that men can't do things without women. Now the Most High made us together, right? The Most High is is designed man and woman to be together, right? So there are things that women are better at than men, right? There are things that men are, most things men are better at than women, right? But a woman has her purpose, right? But he makes it seem so much more. Now, why am I bringing this out as part of this? Because this is a talking point, right? And therefore, what has the robot done? It's just regurgitated this talking point. Okay, it's just regurgitate this talking point because that is basically the information that it has, right? Because that's all. When you look at basically how these robots work, is they're just taking in a shit ton of information, and I got to frame it like that, right? Which is why you get the term large language models, right? Because it's going through an enormous, right, ginormous, any hyperbole you choose to use, right? It's just taking in a load of information and then just making decisions based off of it, right? Which is why, as the elders brought out, right, this is why they want you to interact with it, so you can help guide it and give it even more information. Okay, which is why it's becoming so pervasive in our daily lives, right? Because it, once again, it starts it starts basically I forget, I lost my trail of thought, right? But basically, yeah, you kind of see it, right? So let me just read some of these highlights, right? This is the third point, right? Biological and physiological stress responses, cortisol and immune changes, heart disease and stroke rises, risks spike after spousal loss, especially in older men, right? And social isolation. Men are statistically more likely to be socially isolated after a spouse's death. Loneliness itself is a powerful predictor of mortality, right? It raises the risk of heart disease, dementia, and premature death on par with smoking or obesity, right? It says, which call it in many marriages, especially old ones, a wife may handle day-to-day routines, meals, social planning, house management, blah, blah, blah. Right now, just going off of this information, it's kind of like, okay, that's what it is. And this once again is the point I'm trying to drive home of how these robots are just basically working off of whatever the prevailing narrative is. Okay, because then I asked the robot, I was like, okay, so your assertions work, right, in the modern Western world, but the carer effect hasn't always been the case throughout history. For example, and I said, and confirm if this is true, men who had maids and house help, etc., still died soon after their wives, right? Because a lot of the stuff that it points out at first is this idea of, well, men after their woman die, they can't do anything, and therefore they just die because they can't do anything, right? But it's like, okay, but people in that basically had help would still, men who still had help would still die soon after their wives, right? It's an excellent point, and yes, you're absolutely right to challenge the idea of the carer effect is the explanation, right? Even in a historical upper class context where men had servants, nurses, or housekeepers, we still see a pattern of men dying not long after their wives. That suggests that the phenomenon isn't only about practical caregiving, right? And that's the point, right? Because we, even before I even asked the robot, right, which let me grab that precept, right? Where is it? What? This is First Corinthians 11, right, and 7, right? It says, for a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is for as much as he is the image and glory of the Most High, but the woman is the glory of the man, right? And that's it. A woman's glory is her hair, right? But a man's glory is his wife. So that was my original reasoning, on basically why the Lord has it so, right? Because the Lord, he basically made, he made men to love women, right? Despite the fact that you have abusers of themselves with mankind, right? The Most High made man to love a woman, right? This is, what do you call it? First Ezra's 4, and then where should we start? Right, because that's the thing, because men can go too far to the left with their love of women, right? Damn well, because this thing is going to read quite a bit into it. Slightly spare. I'm just looking for where to start. Let me just read from here. It says, first is 4:22. For us says, by this also ye must know that women have dominion over you. Do ye not labor and toil and give all and bring all to the woman? Yea, a man taketh his sword and goeth his way to rob and steal, to sail upon the sea and upon rivers, and looketh upon land and goeth into darkness. And when he hath stolen, spoiled, and robbed, he bringeth it to his love. Wherefore a man loveth his wife better than father or mother. Yea, many there be that run out their wits for women and become servants for their sake. And when you read Proverbs, was it 31 and 3? Right, what does it say? It says, give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to which destroyed kings. Right, and that's really it, right? Once again, it's just that love a man has, for his for a woman that he's into, right? And once again, the point of this is, not to say that women ain't good at use. Women have use, right? The Most High made it such. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made them, right? But in this world, they push they push this basically this woman worship, which is not so, which is not good. Okay, we're very much made and designed to be together. Okay. It says verse 27 says 4:27 says, many also have perished, have erred and sinned for women, and now do ye not believe me? Right? It is not the king great in his power? Do not all regions fear to touch him? Yet did I see him and Apame, the king's concubine, the daughter of the admirable Barticus, sitting at the right hand of the king, and taking the crown from the king's head and setting it up upon her own head. She also struck the king with her left hand. And yet for all this the king gaped and gazed upon her with open mouth. Right? If she laughed upon him, he also laughed. But if she took any displeasure at him, the king was fain to flatter, that she might be reconciled to him again. O ye men, how can it be but women should be strong, seeing they do thus? Okay. So that, basically just, touching on that, that point. Okay. That men love women, right? But once again, when asking the robot, it was giving me once again this feminist response, basically, right? Once again, not to say that men don't rely on women for stuff like that, and women rely on men, right? That's once again is what the Most High designed, right? But the point of this is more just that, and speaking on that feminist shit, okay, which is what that first response was really getting into, right? Because it doesn't fit the fact that actually in other parts of society, and where men have got housekeepers, people that take care of them and stuff like that, they still die soon after their wives. Okay. So just finishing off, says so it answered one, the psychological bond itself matters, right? Even when physical care and domestic duties were delegated, emotional dependence on the spouse was still profound. In earlier eras, especially among men in high social class, the wife was often the only intimate emotional connection in a man's life, right? I can't verify that statement. Household staff could handle logistics, but not the meaning or companionships that came from the marriage. So the emotional and existential blow of bereavement remained devastating. Physiological stress responses transcend social structure, right? Bereavement triggers measurable physiological effects: increased inflammation, blood pressure, clotting, heart strain. The broken heart mechanisms have been recorded across time and culture. Even where practical support was abundant. Historical evidence backs this up. While data before the 19th century is sparse, historical demographers have noted similar trends in Victorian England. Widowers had high mortality rates than married men, even among the gentry who had staff. Right, it says early 20th century Scandinavian Europe. Right, national registries later showed that the widowhood effect persisted across social classes. Nobility and clergy showed men often dying within a few years of their wives, despite having caretakers. So yes, even with external support, widowed men historically died sooner than their female counterparts. Okay. It says why women fared differently. Women, even in past centuries, tended to maintain more social and kin networks, often through church, children, and community life. Right, men's social identities, by contrast, were often defined through the marriage itself. The wife as emotional center and social conduit. Right, without her, they became isolated, even in a full household. Yada 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 yada. Right, but like I said, I just wanted to point in on that, just once again, we use the robots, right? We make very good use of the robots, but it's just always remembering that it's just regurgitating information back at you, right? And if you, and that's why it's very easy to get taken down the wrong path, right? Especially when you don't, when one doesn't understand, a particular, subject matter. Okay, this was just something that I was through the spirit. Oh, wait, let me come on. Because at first you read it and you be like, oh, whatever, but it's understanding the tone and listening to the tone. You one may basically combat it, right? So good questions to ask is, are you sure? Or so show your sources and stuff like that, But yeah, so hopefully the point was made. And as always, Lord, with us edifying. Until next time, we say shalom.